The blood-curdling scream echoed across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory as Katherine Sinclair clutched her swollen belly, realizing that her baby would not wait for her to reach Fort Laramie. The year was 1868, and Katherine found herself alone under a broken wagon axle with nothing but the vast, unforgiving landscape stretching in every direction. Katherine had been traveling west along the Oregon Trail when disaster struck. Her husband Thomas had succumbed to cholera just 3 weeks prior, leaving her to navigate the treacherous journey alone while 8 months pregnant. The wagon train had been forced to continue without her when the rear axle of her wagon snapped like kindling the previous afternoon. The wagon master had promised to send help back from the next settlement, but Katherine knew that was at least 2 days away. "Not now," she pleaded, gripping the splintered wood of the wagon wheel as another contraction seized her body. "Please, not now." The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Katherine tried to create shade by draping a blanket from the wagon's side. Her 2 oxen, still hitched to the broken wagon, lowed mournfully, as if sensing her distress. She had water, some jerky and hardtack, but no medicine and certainly no help for what was coming. The contractions were coming faster now. Katherine had assisted with births back in Pennsylvania, but experiencing it herself, alone in the wilderness, filled her with a terror unlike anything she had ever known. She managed to spread a quilt beneath the wagon and gather clean cloths from her trunk. As she tried to make herself as comfortable as possible, she saw a cloud of dust on the horizon. "Help," she cried out, though she knew her voice couldn't possibly carry that far. "Please help me." As the dust cloud grew closer, she could make out a lone rider on horseback. Her heart pounded with both hope and fear. In these territories, a stranger could mean salvation or danger. The rider approached steadily, and Katherine could see it was a tall man on a chestnut stallion. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, and his duster coat billowed behind him like wings. "Hello there," the man called out, slowing his horse as he approached. "You all right, madam?" Another contraction hit Katherine, and she couldn't hold back her cry of pain. The man immediately dismounted, tying his horse to the wagon before crouching down to see Katherine under the broken vehicle. "Madam, you're—" His voice trailed off as he realized her situation. "The baby's coming," Katherine managed between gritted teeth. "I need help." The stranger removed his hat, revealing kind eyes in a sun-weathered face. "Name's Isaac Montgomery, madam. I've helped deliver foals and calves, but never a baby." "I don't have much choice in the matter, Mr. Montgomery," Katherine said, attempting a weak smile despite the pain. "This child is determined to see the world today." Isaac nodded, his expression turning resolute. "Then we'll see it through together. Let me get some things from my saddlebags." He returned with a canteen of fresh water, clean bandanas, and a small flask. "Whiskey," he explained. "For your pain if you want it, or to clean my hands." Katherine shook her head at the offer of whiskey. "Save it for your hands. My grandmother would haunt me if I gave her great-grandchild a taste for spirits before its first breath." Isaac smiled at that, pouring some of the amber liquid over his hands. "You've got grit, madam. What's your name?" "Katherine Sinclair," she replied. Before another contraction cut her words short, over the next hours, Isaac proved himself a man of unexpected tenderness and resolve. He spoke in a calm, steady voice, telling Katherine stories of his time as a cowhand to distract her from the pain. He had been riding north to Montana Territory, hoping to find work at one of the big cattle ranches there. "My pa always said I was born in the wrong time," Isaac said as he helped Katherine through a particularly difficult contraction. "Said I should have been a knight in one of those old tales, always wanting to rescue folks." "I'm grateful for that quality today," Katherine gasped, her knuckles white as she gripped his offered hand. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in hues of gold and crimson, Katherine's labor intensified. Isaac built a small fire nearby, ensuring they would have light and warmth through the night. He positioned himself at Katherine's feet, having removed his leather gloves and rolled up his sleeves. "I can see the baby's head," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. "Just a little more, Mrs. Sinclair, you're doing fine." Katherine pushed with all her might, her screams carrying across the empty landscape. With one final, tremendous effort, she felt the pressure release as her child slid into Isaac's waiting hands. "It's a girl," Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful baby girl." He quickly wrapped the infant in one of his clean bandanas, then used his knife to cut the cord as Katherine instructed. The baby's first cry split the air, strong and defiant. "She sounds like she's got her mama's fighting spirit," Isaac said, carefully placing the swaddled infant in Katherine's arms. Katherine looked down at her daughter's tiny face, overcome with love and gratitude. "Hello, my little prairie flower," she whispered. Then, looking up at Isaac with tears streaming down her face, she added, "Thank you. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "No need for payment, madam," Isaac replied, his eyes suspiciously bright in the firelight. "It's been an honor." That night, Isaac kept watch over mother and child, tending the fire and making sure they were comfortable. He fashioned a better shelter using canvas from the wagon and prepared a simple meal of beans and jerky. When Katherine drifted off to sleep with her daughter nestled against her chest, Isaac sat with his back against the wagon wheel, rifle across his lap, guarding them against the wilderness. Morning came with a gentle breeze that rustled the tall grass surrounding their makeshift camp. Katherine awakened to find Isaac already up, cooking something that smelled surprisingly good over the fire. "Morning, Mrs. Sinclair," he said, tipping his hat. "Made some coffee and flapjacks. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep your strength up." Katherine adjusted her position, mindful of her sleeping daughter and her own soreness. "Mr. Montgomery, you're a godsend." Isaac brought her a tin plate and cup, just doing what any decent man would. "We both know that's not true," Katherine replied, accepting the food gratefully. Most men would have tipped their hat and kept riding. Isaac sat across from her, his own plate balanced on his knee. "What happened to your husband, if you don't mind my asking?" Katherine's face fell. "Thomas died of cholera 3 weeks ago. We were headed to Oregon to start fresh. He had a brother there with some land." "I'm mighty sorry for your loss," Isaac said softly. Katherine looked down at her sleeping daughter. "This little one is all I have left of him now." "What will you name her?" Katherine thought for a moment. "I think I'll call her Hope. It seems fitting." Isaac nodded approvingly. "A fine name." As they ate, Katherine explained her situation further. The wagon train had reluctantly left her behind when her axle broke, with the wagon master promising to send help from Fort Laramie. But that help would still be at least another day away if it came at all. "You can't stay out here," Isaac said, looking at the broken wagon with a critical eye. "The axle's beyond repair without proper tools and wood, and you're in no condition to travel far. What choice do I have?" Katherine asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the horizon. "There's a settlement about 15 miles north of here, small place called Willow Creek. I passed through it yesterday. They've got a doctor, or at least someone who calls himself one." 15 miles might as well be 100 in my condition," Katherine said with a sigh. "I could take you," Isaac offered. "My horse Blaze is strong enough to carry us both and the baby if we go slow and careful." Katherine studied him, trying to determine if this stranger could truly be as honorable as he seemed. "Why would you do that? You were headed to Montana," Isaac shrugged. "Montana's been there a long time. Reckon it'll still be there next week." His eyes met hers. "Besides, I feel responsible now. For both of you." That afternoon, after ensuring Katherine was strong enough to travel, Isaac helped her gather the most essential of her belongings. He fashioned a sling for baby Hope from one of Katherine's shawls, securing the infant snugly against her mother's chest. Then, with gentle hands, he helped Katherine mount his horse before climbing up behind her. "What about my oxen?" Katherine asked, looking back at the animals still hitched to the broken wagon. "I'll come back for them once you and the little one are settled," Isaac promised. "They'll be fine for a day or two with water and grass." With Isaac's arms around Katherine to steady her, they set off at a slow, measured pace toward Willow Creek. The journey was difficult, with Katherine still weak from childbirth, but Isaac proved to be a patient and attentive traveling companion. He stopped frequently to let her rest, made sure she drank water regularly, and even sang softly to baby Hope when she fussed. "You're good with her," Katherine observed during one of their rest stops. Isaac smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Had a little sister once. I helped Ma take care of her. Katherine sensed there was more to that story but didn't press. Everyone in these territories carried their share of loss. By nightfall, they had covered only half the distance to Willow Creek. Isaac made camp in a sheltered hollow, building a fire and using his bedroll to create a comfortable place for Katherine and Hope to sleep. "You should take the bedroll," Katherine protested. "You've done enough already." "I've slept on harder ground than this," Isaac replied, settling himself against his saddle with only his coat for warmth. "Rest well, Mrs. Sinclair. We've got more riding tomorrow." Katherine watched him through the flickering firelight, this stranger who had become her protector. "Mr. Montgomery." "Yes, madam. Thank you." Isaac tipped his hat in acknowledgement, his face half hidden in shadow. "Sweet dreams, Mrs. Sinclair." The next morning dawned clear and cool. Isaac was already up, coffee brewing over a small fire when Katherine awoke. Hope was fussing, hungry for her morning meal. "I'll give you some privacy," Isaac said, standing up quickly. "I'll just check on Blaze." Katherine smiled at his consideration as he walked away, giving her space to feed her daughter. By the time Isaac returned, both mother and child were ready to continue their journey. They reached Willow Creek by mid-afternoon. It was a modest settlement, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church with a small steeple, and scattered houses around the perimeter. People stopped to stare as Isaac rode in with Katherine and the newborn. The town doctor, a gruff older man named Dr. Simmons, examined Katherine and Hope in a small room behind his office. "You're lucky," he told Katherine. "Giving birth in those conditions, all manner of things could have gone wrong, but you and the baby appear healthy enough." "Mr. Montgomery helped me," Katherine explained. "I don't know what I would have done without him." Dr. Simmons glanced at Isaac, who was waiting awkwardly in the corner of the room. Not many men would stop for a woman in trouble, let alone know what to do in a birth. "You found yourself a rare one, Mrs. Sinclair." "He's not," Katherine began, but the doctor had already moved on to examining Hope more closely. After confirming that both mother and child were doing well considering the circumstances, Dr. Simmons recommended at least a week of rest before Katherine attempted any further travel. The town's small boarding house had a vacant room, but when Isaac went to inquire about it, he returned with a troubled expression. "The room's available," he said, "but I'm afraid my funds won't stretch to cover it for a week." Katherine's face fell. Her own money was limited, carefully saved for starting her new life in Oregon. "I could camp outside town," Isaac suggested. "Use what money I have to secure the room for you and Hope." Before Katherine could protest, the door to the doctor's office opened and a matronly woman with silver-streaked hair entered. "Martha," Dr. Simmons greeted her. "I was just about to send for you." "Word travels fast in Willow Creek," the woman replied with a warm smile. She turned to Katherine. "Martha Holloway, my dear. I run the general store with my husband George, and I understand you've had quite an ordeal." Katherine nodded, clutching Hope closer. "Well, we can't have a new mother and her baby staying at that drafty old boarding house," Martha declared. "We have a spare room above our store. It's yours for as long as you need it." Katherine's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected kindness. "I can't accept nonsense," Martha interrupted gently. "Consider it a welcome to Willow Creek." "And your friend is welcome too," she added, nodding toward Isaac. "George could use some help unloading the supply wagon that came in yesterday." Isaac straightened his hat. "I'd be happy to help, madam, and I need to go back for Mrs. Sinclair's oxen and belongings." "George can lend you our wagon for that," Martha said decisively. "Now, let's get this young mother and her baby settled." The room above the general store was small but clean, with a comfortable bed, a crib that Martha explained had belonged to her own children, and a rocking chair by the window. Katherine was overwhelmed by the generosity. "I don't know how to thank you," she said as Martha helped her settle into the room. "No need for thanks," Martha replied. "We all help each other out here. That's how we survive." She glanced out the window to where Isaac was already helping George Holloway with crates of supplies. "Your husband seems like a good man," Katherine blushed. "Mr. Montgomery isn't my husband. He's just a passing cowboy who stopped to help when I went into labor." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Well, he certainly looks at you like a man with more than passing interest." Before Katherine could respond, Hope began to cry, and the conversation turned to more immediate matters of caring for a newborn. The next morning, Isaac set out with George Holloway's wagon to retrieve Katherine's belongings and oxen. He returned late in the afternoon, having salvaged everything of value from the broken wagon. "Your oxen are settled in the Holloway's stable," he reported to Katherine, who was sitting in the rocking chair by the window with Hope in her arms. "And I've brought all your trunks and supplies." "Thank you," Katherine said softly. "You've gone above and beyond what anyone could expect." Isaac removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "Mrs. Sinclair, Katherine, I've been thinking about your situation." Katherine's heart beat a little faster at his use of her first name. "What about it? You're alone, with a new baby, heading to Oregon to meet your husband's brother. That's a hard journey even for a wagon train, let alone a single woman." "I'm aware of the difficulties," Katherine said, lifting her chin slightly, "but I don't have many options." Isaac took a deep breath. "You could stay here in Willow Creek. The Holloways seem fond of you already, and I've heard there's need for a schoolteacher." "George mentioned you were educated." Katherine was surprised. "I did teach for a while before I married Thomas, but I can't impose on the Holloways' kindness indefinitely." "Or," Isaac continued, his voice dropping lower, "you could let me escort you to Oregon. Once you're stronger and the baby's a bit older, I'd see you safely to your brother-in-law's place." Katherine studied his face, noticing for the first time the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Why would you do that? You were heading to Montana for work." Isaac's gaze dropped to his hat, still turning in his hands. "I've grown rather attached to you both, if I'm being honest. The thought of riding away and never knowing if you made it safely, it doesn't sit right with me." A warmth spread through Katherine's chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the window. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Montgomery." "Isaac," he corrected gently. "After what we've been through together, I think we can use our given names." "Isaac," Katherine repeated, the name feeling right on her lips. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to decide anything right now," he assured her. "You need time to recover, to think about what's best for you and Hope." Katherine nodded, grateful for his understanding. "And what will you do in the meantime? Mr. Holloway has offered me work at the store, and there's a room available at the boarding house. I'll stay in Willow Creek, at least until you've made your decision." That evening, as Katherine laid Hope in her crib, she found herself thinking about Isaac's offer. The idea of him accompanying them to Oregon was comforting, but she sensed there was more to his proposal than simple escort duty. The way he looked at Hope, with such tenderness, and the warmth in his eyes when he spoke to Katherine, it suggested feelings developing beyond mere obligation. And if she were honest with herself, Katherine felt something too. It was too soon after Thomas's death for romantic thoughts, and yet there was an undeniable connection between her and this kind cowboy who had delivered her child. The days passed peacefully in Willow Creek. Isaac became a familiar sight at the general store, helping George with heavy lifting and repairs. He visited Katherine and Hope every day, often bringing small gifts, a piece of ribbon for Hope's hair, wildflowers for Katherine's room, or fresh berries he had picked himself. One evening, about a week after their arrival in Willow Creek, Isaac brought dinner to Katherine's room, a stew Martha had prepared, along with fresh bread. "You're spoiling me," Katherine said as they sat together at the small table by the window. Hope was sleeping soundly in her crib. "You deserve to be spoiled a little," Isaac replied with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Stronger every day," Katherine said. "Dr. Simmons says I'm healing well." Isaac nodded, looking pleased. "Have you given any more thought to what comes next?" Katherine set down her spoon. "I have. I've written to Thomas's brother in Oregon, explaining what happened, but it will be weeks before I receive a reply, if one comes at all. I've never met him, and for all I know, he may not welcome a widow with a newborn. So what will you do?" "I've spoken with Mayor Jensen. The town does need a teacher, at least temporarily. The previous one left for Denver last month. The position comes with a small cottage behind the schoolhouse." Isaac's face brightened. "So you're staying in Willow Creek for now," Katherine confirmed. "At least until I hear from Thomas's brother, or until I've saved enough to continue the journey safely." "That's wonderful news," Isaac said, his relief evident. I mean, for the town, the children need a good teacher. Katherine smiled at his attempt at nonchalance. And you, Isaac. Will you continue to Montana now that I've made my decision? Isaac hesitated, running a hand through his hair. Actually, I've been offered a position too. The Rocking J Ranch just outside of town needs a foreman. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, is getting on in years and can't manage it all himself anymore. So you'll be staying too, if that's all right with you, Isaac said, his eyes meeting hers. Katherine felt a flutter in her chest. Why would you need my permission? Because, Isaac said slowly, I wouldn't want you to think I was imposing myself where I'm not wanted. Our meeting was unusual, and I know you're still grieving your husband. Katherine reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I am grieving, she acknowledged. But having you near brings me comfort, not pain. You saved our lives, Isaac. You're always welcome in mine. The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. The following weeks established a new routine. Katherine began teaching at the small schoolhouse, with Martha Holloway watching Hope during school hours. Isaac took on his role at the Rocking J Ranch, riding into town most evenings to visit Katherine and Hope. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the surrounding countryside in rich golds and reds. Katherine found herself settling into life in Willow Creek, forming friendships with the townspeople, and taking pride in her students' progress. Hope grew stronger each day, a happy, healthy baby who captivated everyone she met. Isaac became a regular visitor at the small cottage behind the schoolhouse, often bringing supplies or making repairs around the property. His gentle manner with Hope touched Katherine deeply, as did his respect for her continued mourning for Thomas. One crisp October evening, Isaac arrived at the cottage with his arms full of firewood. Thought you might need this, he said, stacking it neatly by the hearth. It's getting colder at night. Katherine was sitting in her rocking chair, sewing a new dress for Hope from fabric Martha had given her. Thank you, you're always thinking of us. Isaac removed his hat, revealing hair that had grown longer since their first meeting. I got a letter today, he said, his expression unreadable. Katherine set aside her sewing. From Montana? No, Isaac said, taking a seat across from her. From Oregon, from your brother-in-law Samuel Sinclair. Katherine's eyes widened. How? I took the liberty of writing to him myself, Isaac explained. I wanted to make sure he knew about your situation, in case your letter went astray. What did he say? Katherine asked, her heart racing. Isaac reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded paper. He was grieved to hear about Thomas. He says you and Hope are welcome on his homestead, but… Isaac hesitated. But what? He's planning to sell the land come spring, heading to California, says there's better opportunities there. Isaac handed her the letter. He invites you to join him for that journey, if you wish. Katherine read the letter herself, confirming Isaac's summary. Samuel Sinclair expressed sympathy for her loss, but made it clear that his Oregon homestead was only a temporary arrangement. I see, she said finally, folding the letter again. So even if I had made it to Oregon as planned, I would soon be uprooted again. Seems that way, Isaac agreed, watching her carefully. Does this change your plans? Katherine gazed at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her cradle. I don't know. I came west for a fresh start, for a home. Oregon was only the destination because Thomas had family there. And now, Katherine looked up, meeting Isaac's steady gaze. Now I wonder if perhaps home isn't a place but a feeling, a sense of belonging. Isaac leaned forward, his expression earnest. And do you feel that here in Willow Creek? I'm beginning to, Katherine admitted. The people have been kind, the work is fulfilling, and Hope is thriving. I'm glad, Isaac said softly. He stood, retrieving his hat. I should go, it's getting late. As he reached the door, Katherine called after him. Isaac, he turned, his silhouette framed by the twilight outside. Yes. Would you come to dinner tomorrow? I'd like to thank you properly for all you've done for us. A slow smile spread across his face. I'd be honored, Katherine. The following evening, Katherine prepared a special meal, a roast chicken with vegetables from Martha's garden, and an apple pie made from the last of the fall harvest. She dressed with particular care, choosing a blue dress that Thomas had always said brought out the color of her eyes. Isaac arrived promptly at 6, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt under his usual vest. He brought a small wooden toy horse he had carved himself for Hope, and a bouquet of late wildflowers for Katherine. "These are beautiful," Katherine said, arranging them in a jar on the table. "I didn't think anything was still blooming." "You just have to know where to look," Isaac replied, a warmth in his eyes that made Katherine's cheeks flush. The dinner was more relaxed than Katherine had anticipated. They talked easily about the town, her students, his work at the ranch. After the meal, they sat by the fire with cups of coffee, Hope sleeping contentedly in her cradle nearby. "I never thanked you properly," Katherine said after a comfortable silence. Isaac looked puzzled. "For what? I thought that's what this dinner was for." "Not just for the letter to Samuel or the firewood or all the little things you do for us. For that day under the broken wagon." Katherine's voice softened with emotion. "You could have ridden past, most men would have." "I couldn't have lived with myself if I had," Isaac said simply. "Where did you learn to deliver a baby?" Katherine asked, curious about this skill that had saved her and Hope. Isaac's expression turned distant, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "My mother was a midwife back in Kentucky. I used to assist her sometimes, fetching things she needed. I watched her work more times than I can count." "She taught you well." Isaac nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "She died during a cholera outbreak when I was 16, along with my father and sister." "Oh, Isaac, I'm so sorry," Katherine said, understanding now his earlier comment about having had a little sister. "It was a long time ago," he said, though the pain in his voice suggested the wounds were still fresh. "After they died, I headed west. Been drifting ever since, working ranches, driving cattle, never stayed in one place too long." "Until now," Katherine observed. Isaac's eyes met hers. "Until now." Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing since that fateful day on the prairie. "Katherine," Isaac began, setting down his coffee cup. "I know it might be too soon. I know you're still honoring Thomas's memory, as you should, but I want you to know that I care deeply for you and Hope." Katherine felt tears welling in her eyes. "Isaac, you don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Katherine reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thomas will always be a part of me," she said softly. "He was a good man and Hope's father, but he's gone and I'm still here, still living." Isaac squeezed her hand gently. "And I want you to live fully, whether that includes me or not." "It does," Katherine whispered. "Include you, I mean, more and more each day." The look of joy that spread across Isaac's face was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her lips. It was a brief kiss, respectful and sweet, but it kindled something in Katherine that she had thought might be forever extinguished by grief, hope for a future filled with love. As winter settled over Willow Creek, Isaac became an even more constant presence in Katherine and Hope's life. He helped Katherine prepare the cottage for the cold months ahead, ensuring the roof was sound and the windows properly sealed. On Sundays, they attended church together, drawing knowing smiles from the townspeople who had watched their relationship blossom. Hope celebrated her first Christmas surrounded by the warmth of community and the adoration of Isaac, who had crafted a beautiful wooden rocking horse as her gift. Katherine found herself embracing the holiday with a joy she hadn't expected to feel so soon after Thomas's death. But there was something healing in the town's celebrations and in Isaac's steadfast presence. As they walked home from the Christmas Eve service, snow falling gently around them and Hope bundled warmly in Katherine's arms, Isaac stopped suddenly in the path. "What is it?" Katherine asked, turning to face him. Isaac took a deep breath, his exhale visible in the cold night air. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about home being a feeling rather than a place." Katherine nodded, remembering their conversation after Samuel's letter. "I never had that feeling, not since losing my family," Isaac continued, "until I met you and Hope. You've given me something I thought I'd never find again, a sense of belonging." Katherine felt her heart quicken as Isaac reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. "I know it hasn't been that long," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "And I'll understand if you need more time, But I love you, Katherine. I love Hope as if she were my own, and I want to build a life with you both if you'll have me." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful gold band. "This was my mother's," he explained. "The only thing I kept when I left Kentucky." Katherine gazed at the ring, then at Isaac's hopeful face, illuminated by the moonlight reflecting off the snow. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty what her answer would be. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy freezing on her cheeks in the winter air. "Yes, Isaac, we'll build that life together." Isaac's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he gathered both Katherine and Hope into his arms, holding them close as the snow continued to fall around them, a family forged in the most unexpected of circumstances. They were married on New Year's Day, 1869, in the small church of Willow Creek. Martha Holloway held Hope during the ceremony, beaming with pride as if Katherine and Isaac were her own children. The entire town turned out for the celebration, filling the schoolhouse with laughter and music for the reception. That night, as they settled Hope into her cradle in what was now their shared home, Isaac placed a gentle hand on Katherine's shoulder. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, testing the sound of her new name. Katherine turned into his embrace, her heart full. "It has a nice ring to it." "Indeed it does," Isaac agreed, before lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Spring brought new beginnings for the Montgomery family. Isaac had saved enough money over the winter to put a down payment on a small ranch just outside of Willow Creek. It wasn't large, just 20 acres with a modest house and barn, but it was theirs. "What do you think?" Isaac asked as he showed Katherine around the property for the first time. Hope, now nearly a year old, was perched on his hip, babbling happily. Katherine took in the rolling meadow, the creek running along the property line, and the solid, if simple, two-bedroom house. "It's perfect," she said, her eyes shining. "Absolutely perfect." "I thought we could plant an orchard over there," Isaac said, pointing to a sunny slope. "And maybe someday, when we've saved a bit more, add onto the house." "Someday," Katherine agreed, placing a hand on her stomach with a secret smile, "though perhaps sooner than you think." Isaac's eyes widened as he realized what she was telling him. "Katherine, are you?" She nodded, her happiness too great for words. Isaac whooped with joy, setting Hope down carefully before lifting Katherine into his arms and spinning her around. "A baby, our baby, due in October," Katherine confirmed once he set her back on her feet. "Dr. Simmons confirmed it yesterday." Isaac knelt down, gathering Hope into one arm while placing his other hand reverently on Katherine's still flat stomach. "Did you hear that, Hope? You're going to be a big sister." Hope patted Isaac's cheek in response, making both adults laugh. That evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant hues, Isaac wrapped an arm around Katherine's shoulders. "Did you ever imagine, when your wagon broke down that day, that this is where you'd end up?" he asked. Katherine leaned into his embrace. "Never in my wildest dreams. I thought I had lost everything when Thomas died. I was terrified when I realized Hope was coming in the middle of nowhere. And then I came riding up, like something out of a dime novel," Isaac said with a chuckle. "My knight in dusty leather," Katherine teased, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You know, Martha Holloway told me recently that she believes some things are meant to be, that no matter how random they seem, certain meetings are destined. Like a broken wagon axle and a cowboy who happened to be passing by." "Exactly like that," Katherine agreed, her voice soft with wonder. "If any single thing had been different, if the axle had broken a day later, or if you had taken a different route, we might never have met." Isaac pulled her closer. "I prefer to think I would have found you somehow, some way." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, the grief and fear, the unexpected kindness of strangers, and the love that had grown from the most desperate of circumstances. Thomas would always be a part of her story, the father of her firstborn child, but Isaac was her future, a future brighter than she could have imagined during those dark days on the trail. "I believe you would have," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Some things truly are meant to be." The summer passed in a flurry of activity as Isaac and Katherine established their ranch. They planted vegetable gardens and began work on the orchard Isaac had envisioned. Katherine continued teaching at the schoolhouse until the end of the term, with plans to return after the new baby was born and old enough for Martha to mind along with Hope. As Katherine's pregnancy progressed, Isaac became increasingly protective, insisting on driving her to and from town in their wagon rather than letting her walk the mile to the schoolhouse. The townspeople watched with knowing smiles as the once solitary cowboy fussed over his wife, making sure she rested often and ate well. "You're going to smother the poor woman," George Holloway teased one day as Isaac purchased extra pillows from the general store. "Can't be too careful," Isaac replied, unembarrassed by his concern. Not after the way Hope came into this world. As summer turned to fall, Hope took her first steps, toddling unsteadily from Katherine to Isaac with a look of determined concentration that made both parents laugh with delight. "She has your stubbornness," Isaac told Katherine as Hope tried again after falling. "And your perseverance," Katherine countered, watching as their daughter finally reached Isaac's outstretched hands. On a crisp October morning, with the aspens glowing gold in the early light, Katherine went into labor with their second child. This time, there was no broken wagon, no desperate solitude. Isaac rode for Dr. Simmons while Martha Holloway came to stay with Hope and assist Katherine. The labor was long but uncomplicated, and as evening fell, Isaac Montgomery held his son in his arms for the first time. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at the tiny face. "Just perfect." Katherine watched them from the bed, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "What shall we name him?" Isaac thought for a moment. "How about Thomas, to honor his memory?" Katherine's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected generosity of spirit. "Thomas Isaac Montgomery," she said, testing the name. "It's beautiful." Isaac placed their son gently in her arms before sitting on the edge of the bed. "I want him to know where he comes from, all of it. How his mother survived against all odds, how his sister was born under a broken wagon, and how his father, his first father, was a good man who would have loved him." Katherine leaned forward to kiss Isaac softly. "And how his second father is the most wonderful man I've ever known." Hope, allowed into the room to meet her new brother, climbed onto the bed with Isaac's help. She peered curiously at the baby, then planted a somewhat wet kiss on his forehead, making both parents laugh. "What do you think, Hope?" Isaac asked. "Is he a keeper?" Hope nodded solemnly before snuggling into Isaac's side, clearly ready for a nap after all the excitement. As night fell over their small ranch, the Montgomery family rested together in the warm glow of lamplight. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the prairie in white. But inside, there was only warmth, love, and the quiet certainty that they had found where they truly belonged with each other. 5 years passed, bringing both joys and challenges to the Montgomery family. Their ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management, expanding to 60 acres with a growing herd of cattle and the thriving orchard they had planted together. Katherine had returned to teaching part-time, balancing her work with raising their growing family. Thomas, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's dark hair and his mother's thoughtful blue eyes, had been joined by a sister, Emma, born 2 years after him. At 3, Emma was a spirited child who followed Hope everywhere, idolizing her older sister with unabashed devotion. Hope, now 6, had started school the previous year, and was already showing a gift for numbers that made Katherine beam with pride. She knew the story of her birth of the broken wagon and the cowboy who had stopped to help, and considered it her own personal fairy tale. "Tell it again, Papa," she would often ask Isaac in the evenings as the family gathered around the fireplace. And Isaac would oblige, recounting the tale of how he had found Katherine stranded on the prairie, of Hope's dramatic arrival, and of how he had known, from the first moment he held the newborn baby in his hands, that his life would never be the same. "Your mama was the bravest person I'd ever seen," he would say, winking at Katherine across the room. "And the prettiest too." On a warm afternoon in the summer of 1874, as the family prepared for a picnic to celebrate Isaac and Catherine's 5th wedding anniversary, a rider approached their ranch. Katherine was in the kitchen, packing food into a basket, while Isaac helped the children gather blankets and toys. "Someone's coming," Thomas announced, his keen eyes spotting the dust cloud first. Isaac stepped onto the porch, shading his eyes against the sun. The rider was unfamiliar, a middle-aged man on a dappled gray horse. As he drew closer, Isaac could see he was well-dressed, with the look of a city dweller rather than a local rancher. "Can I help you?" Isaac called as the man reached their gate. The stranger dismounted, removing his hat. "I'm looking for Katherine Sinclair," he said. "I was told in town she might be found here." Isaac felt a twinge of unease. Few people still used Katherine's former name. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "My name is James Sinclair," the man said. "I'm Thomas Sinclair's cousin. I've been searching for his widow for some time." Isaac's protective instincts flared, but he kept his voice even. "I'm Isaac Montgomery. Katherine is my wife now." A flash of surprise crossed James Sinclair's face. "I see. Is she available to speak with me? It's a matter of some importance." Isaac hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Please come inside." Katherine looked up from her task as Isaac entered the kitchen with the stranger, her hands stilled on the bread she was wrapping. "Katherine," Isaac said gently, "this is James Sinclair, Thomas's cousin." Katherine's eyes widened. "Cousin?" Thomas never mentioned a cousin, only his brother Samuel. James Sinclair bowed slightly. "Thomas and I weren't close, I'm afraid. Our fathers had a falling out many years ago, but I've been trying to locate you since I learned of his passing." "Why?" Katherine asked directly, moving to stand beside Isaac. "Thomas's brother Samuel died last winter in California," James explained. "Influenza. Before he died, he wrote to me, attempting to reconcile our branch of the family. He mentioned you and your child, and that you had been bound for Oregon to join him." Katherine exchanged a glance with Isaac, who placed a supportive hand on her back. "I'm sorry to hear about Samuel," she said, "but I still don't understand why you've been searching for me." James reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. "Samuel made some fortunate investments in California. When he died, he left everything to Thomas, not knowing his brother had preceded him in death. As Thomas's widow and the mother of his child, the inheritance now rightfully belongs to you." Katherine stared at the envelope, stunned. "Inheritance? A considerable sum," James confirmed. "Enough to change your circumstances significantly should you wish it." Hope appeared in the doorway, curious about the visitor. She was followed by Thomas and Emma, who peered shyly around their older sister. James Sinclair's gaze moved to the children, lingering on Hope. "This must be Thomas's daughter," Katherine nodded, reaching out to draw Hope to her side. "Yes, this is Hope. And these are our younger children, Thomas and Emma." James seemed momentarily confused by Katherine referring to the boy as Thomas, but quickly recovered. "They're beautiful children, Mrs. Montgomery. You and your husband must be very proud." "We are," Isaac said, gathering Thomas and Emma close as they sought reassurance from the unfamiliar visitor. James handed the envelope to Katherine. "The details are all here, the bank where the funds are held, the legal documentation. I've taken the liberty of having my attorney prepare everything. You need only sign the papers to claim what is rightfully yours." Katherine accepted the envelope with a slightly trembling hand. "Thank you for going to such trouble to find us." "It was the right thing to do," James said simply. Samuel was very clear that he wanted Thomas's family to be provided for. After some hesitation, Katherine invited James to stay for dinner. The picnic plans were postponed as she and Isaac absorbed this unexpected development. James proved to be a polite guest, sharing stories of his life in St. Louis and expressing genuine interest in the ranch and the children. Later that night, after James had departed for the hotel in town and the children were asleep, Katherine and Isaac sat at their kitchen table, the contents of the envelope spread before them. "It's a fortune," Isaac said quietly, looking at the figures on the bank draft. "More money than I'll earn in 20 years of ranching." Katherine nodded, still processing the implications. "It changes everything, or it could." Isaac reached for her hand. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about all the things we've talked about but couldn't afford," Katherine admitted. Expanding the ranch, building a bigger house, sending the children to college someday. All possible now, Isaac acknowledged. But I'm also thinking about what's truly important, Katherine continued, squeezing his hand. We were happy before this money, Isaac, truly happy. Isaac smiled, the warmth in his eyes melting any concern she might have had about his reaction to the inheritance. We are. And this doesn't change that. No, Katherine agreed. It doesn't change what matters. They decided to use the inheritance carefully. A portion would be set aside for each child's education. Some would go toward improvements on the ranch, a larger barn, better equipment, a few more hands to help with the expanding herd. And some would be donated to the town of Willow Creek to build a proper library and improve the schoolhouse. And perhaps, Katherine suggested as they prepared for bed, a small sum for a trip. I've always wanted to see the ocean. Isaac gathered her into his arms. Then you shall see it. We all will. The following spring, the Montgomery family embarked on their first real vacation, a journey by train to San Francisco. The children were beside themselves with excitement, especially Hope, who had developed an interest in ships and sailing from books Isaac had bought her. Standing on the cliff above the Pacific, with Isaac's arm around her waist and their children playing nearby, Katherine felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her like the waves below. "Penny for your thoughts," Isaac said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," Katherine replied. "Not just the miles from Wyoming to California, but from that day under the broken wagon." Isaac pulled her closer. "The best detour I ever took. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come along that day?" Katherine asked. Isaac was quiet for a moment, his gaze on their children, Hope showing Thomas and Emma how to skip stones into the tide pools below. "I try not to," he admitted finally. "The thought of you alone out there, of not knowing Hope, of never having Thomas and Emma. It's too painful to consider." Katherine rested her head against his shoulder. "I believe someone would have come along eventually, but I'm endlessly grateful it was you." "As am I," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every single day." They stayed by the ocean for 2 weeks, watching their children discover seashells and tide pools, teaching Hope to swim in the hotel's bathing area, and walking along the beach at sunset, hand in hand. It was a time of pure joy, unmarred by the daily concerns of the ranch or the memories of harder times. On their last evening, as they packed for the journey home, Hope approached her parents with a serious expression. "Papa," she said, "I've been thinking." Isaac knelt down to her level. "What about, sweetheart?" "About my story about being born under the wagon," Hope said, "and about how you found Mama and me." Isaac nodded, wondering where this was leading. "What about it?" "Well," Hope said, her young face earnest, "I think it was magic." Katherine joined them, curious. "Magic? What do you mean?" "Like in the fairy tales," Hope explained. "You were in trouble, and Papa came just in time, like a prince, and then you fell in love and lived happily ever after." Isaac and Katherine exchanged amused glances over their daughter's head. "It wasn't exactly like the fairy tales," Katherine said gently. "Real life is more complicated than that." "But you did fall in love," Hope insisted, "and you are happy." "Yes," Isaac agreed, reaching for Katherine's hand. "We are very happy." "Then it was magic," Hope declared with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. "The best kind of magic." Isaac gathered his firstborn daughter into a hug. "Maybe you're right, Hope. Maybe it was magic after all." That night, as they traveled east on the train, the children sleeping in their berths, Katherine and Isaac sat close together, watching the moonlit landscape pass by outside their window. "Hope has a romantic soul," Katherine observed. "I wonder where she gets that from." Isaac chuckled. "Not from the practical schoolteacher or the hard-bitten cowboy, surely. Perhaps it's just her nature," Katherine mused. "Or perhaps she sees something true about us that we're too close to recognize." "What's that?" Katherine turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "That what happened between us was extraordinary. Against all odds, in the vastness of the frontier, you found me when I needed you most. And somehow, from that desperate beginning, we built this beautiful life together." Isaac's eyes shone in the dim light of the train car. "If that's not magic, I don't know what is." As the train carried them back toward Wyoming and the home they had created together, Katherine thought about the long, winding path that had brought her here, the grief and loss, the fear and uncertainty, but also the unexpected joy and the love that had grown from the most desperate of circumstances. She thought of Hope's birth under that broken wagon, of Isaac's steady hands and calm voice guiding her through, of their wedding in the little church in Willow Creek, of Thomas's and Emma's arrivals, each one enlarging their circle of love. And she knew with absolute certainty that Hope was right. There was magic in their story, not the magic of fairy tales with enchanted castles and talking animals, but the deeper magic of human connection, of finding love when and where you least expect it, of building something enduring from a chance encounter on the vast American frontier. As if reading her thoughts, Isaac lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you, Katherine Montgomery, yesterday, today, and always." "And I love you," Katherine replied, resting her head on his shoulder as the train carried them homeward through the night. "My cowboy who stopped and never left my side."